How did a medical emergency expose your best friend's darkest secret? Before we start, make sure you're subscribed to Tale Hub. Every story here hides something that might change the way you see people forever. I used to believe that silence made me invisible. When you can't hear the world, you start to think the world can't hear you back. I'd sit in the back of classrooms, hands folded, eyes tracing words on lips that never reached me, and I'd imagine myself like a ghost sitting among the living. Teachers moved their mouths. Chalk squeaked on the board, desks scraped, and none of it existed for me. I lived in that muted bubble until 3 boys broke through it: Cade, Lake, and Wayne. They weren't supposed to notice someone like me. They were the kind of guys whose laughter filled every hallway, who were called up first for sports, whose names floated in every conversation. The Golden Circle. But somehow, they reached out. They learned sign language, stayed after school, practicing shapes until their fingers moved like mine. They stood between me and the stares of kids who didn't know what to make of me. It was the first time I thought I might not have to be invisible forever. Still, even in those early days, a small part of me was afraid. When something feels too good, you wait for it to break. My mother always said people were kind until it cost them something. I didn't want to believe that about my friends. But sometimes I'd catch the way other kids looked at them when they hung out with me, as if my silence was contagious, as if they were wasting their shine on someone dull. Then, just after my 14th birthday, everything changed. My mom gave me a small box wrapped in paper she'd saved from Christmas. Inside was a pair of hearing aids, real ones. I held them like they were made of glass, my hands shaking. When I switched them on, the world erupted. At first it was terrifying. Every sound crashed into me at once. The hum of the refrigerator, the rustle of curtains, the soft pulse of my mother breathing beside me. I couldn't stop crying. That night, she held my hand and told me to be careful. Not because she didn't trust them, but because people can be unpredictable when you change the way you exist in their world. But all I could think about was showing my friends. The next morning, I walked into school hearing the world for the first time. The squeak of sneakers, lockers slamming, laughter echoing down the hall. It was chaos, and it was beautiful. I wanted to tell them, to see their faces when they realized I could finally hear their voices. But then I heard something I wasn't supposed to. Around the corner by the science wing, Cade's voice. It was strange and sharp, real and new. My heart pounded because it was the first time I'd ever heard it. He was talking to Irisa, the girl I'd liked since the 4th grade. And what I heard made the air go cold. They were talking about me, about something they had to do before I found out, about keeping a secret, about not letting me see. I didn't catch everything. My brain was still adjusting to the flood of sound. But the words were enough to make my stomach twist. My mind raced. He can't see us. I feel terrible about this. Don't do it until he finds out. I stood frozen, my heart thrumming against the new rhythm of the world. When I walked into the next classroom, I couldn't look at them. I watched their hands move, signing to me as if nothing had changed. Cade smiled like always. Lake nudged my shoulder. Wayne joked with a thumbs up. I answered with shaky gestures, but inside, everything had shifted. I started to notice things I'd ignored before. The way Cade would stop signing mid-sentence when Irisa walked by. The glances they exchanged when they thought I wasn't looking. How Lake and Wayne sometimes changed the subject when I approached. Every small thing became evidence. They were hiding something from me. Maybe my mother had been right. Maybe kindness was just another mask people wore until it slipped. The next few days were torture. I kept pretending I couldn't hear, even though every word they said landed inside my chest like a stone. I thought about confronting them, but I couldn't. I wanted proof. Something real. Then came the dance. Every year, the school gym turned into a blur of lights and noise. I'd never gone before. Crowds made me anxious. Too many moving mouths. Too much space between what I could and couldn't catch. But that year, I decided I had to go. If they were planning something, whatever it was, I wanted to see it myself. The days before the dance were heavy. My friends kept trying to talk to me, signing questions I pretended not to understand. I avoided their eyes. I told myself it didn't matter anymore. But of course it did. The night of the dance, the gym buzzed like electricity. Music pulsed through the floorboards, lights spun across walls, and my hearing aids turned every sound into a living storm. I felt dizzy, alive, and terrified all at once. Then I saw them. Cade, Lake, Wayne, standing near the entrance, and Irisa. She was beautiful in a way that made my chest ache. I almost turned to leave, but before I could, she started walking toward me. Her hands trembled as she began to sign. I stood, frozen, watching. The movements were clumsy, halting, like someone who had just learned. Then I realized what she was trying to say. She was signing to me. Every letter, every motion was directed at me. And then it hit me. All the whispers, all the secret meetings, all the glances. They weren't hiding something from me. They were preparing something for me. Cade had been teaching her sign language, not because he was in love with her, but because she was in love with me. The sound of my own heartbeat drowned out the music. I wanted to laugh, to cry, to scream. She finished signing, her hands shaking, and for the first time in my life, I spoke words aloud. Yes, the sound was raw, cracked, unfamiliar, but it was mine. Irisa's eyes widened. I showed her the hearing aids, my voice trembling as I explained, half with words, half with signs. Cade, Lake, and Wayne rushed forward, shouting things I could actually hear. Their laughter exploded around me, messy and real. For the first time, noise felt like love. That night, everything I thought I knew about friendship and trust rewrote itself. They hadn't pitied me, they hadn't used me, they'd seen me completely. And they wanted me to have the chance to hear love, not just see it. We danced until the lights dimmed and the music bled into static. The world no longer felt silent or strange. It felt mine. The following weeks felt like waking up inside a dream that never stopped moving. Every sound was new and overwhelming, the drip of faucets, the whisper of paper, even the wind pushing against the school doors. I caught myself pausing mid-step just to listen to things I'd never known existed. But what amazed me most wasn't the world itself. It was how easily I began to lose my balance inside it. The silence I once hated had been predictable. Now every corner of my day was a wave I couldn't always stand against. My friends stayed close at first. Cade would point out different sounds, showing me how to identify them. The hum of lights, the thump of lockers, the quick bark of laughter from across the hallway. Lake and Wayne would exaggerate gestures so I could connect movement with noise, helping my brain learn rhythm and tone. For a while, everything between us felt perfect. We walked home together. They teased me about how I flinched every time the school bell rang. The sound still hit me like a lightning strike, too sharp, too sudden. But I was grateful. I thought the worst was behind me. Then small cracks began to show. It started with the way people looked at me now. I wasn't just the deaf kid anymore. I was the miracle story, the one who could suddenly hear. Teachers asked me to talk about it. Classmates tried to see my hearing aids up close like I was some kind of exhibit. They asked questions that weren't really questions, curiosity dressed as pity. Even my friends changed in tiny ways. They still used sign language, but less often. They spoke freely among themselves, forgetting sometimes that I was still learning how to keep up with real voices. My mind couldn't translate fast enough. The world was louder than I was ready for, and their laughter sometimes ran ahead of me before I could catch it. I didn't tell them how it felt. I didn't want to sound ungrateful, but every time they drifted into their easy rhythm, words flowing like water I couldn't quite swim through, something inside me tightened. Irisa tried to stay close. She'd text me before school, small messages filled with sunshine emojis and awkward questions. She was still learning sign language, but she refused to stop trying. Every afternoon, she'd sit with me under the oak trees behind the gym, repeating the same signs until her fingers moved right. Sometimes I'd turn off my hearing aids and just watch her hands. The silence made the world simple again. One afternoon, she caught me doing it, turning them off mid-sentence. I expected her to be offended, but she only smiled and kept signing. In that moment, I realized she understood something my friends didn't. Silence wasn't my weakness. It was my balance. But not everyone was as kind. Rumors started spreading. Stupid things whispered in the cafeteria or scribbled on locker doors. That Cade and the others only hung out with me for attention. That they felt sorry for me. That Irisa liked me because she wanted to look good. At first, I ignored it. But the words found their way inside me, echoing louder than any sound I'd learned to recognize. The first real fracture came during lunch one day. I sat at our usual table, surrounded by laughter and motion. They were talking fast, voices overlapping. I tried to follow, piecing together half-heard words, half-read lips, but it felt like chasing a train already gone. Cade said something that made Lake laugh hard enough to slap the table. Wayne leaned in, grinning. I didn't catch it, so I asked what they'd said. They froze for a second, not because it was cruel, but because it had been an inside joke. One they hadn't meant to explain. That second of hesitation was enough. The silence after it felt heavier than any noise. I smiled like it was fine, but it wasn't. That night, lying in bed, I kept replaying the moment. The look they'd shared, quick, harmless, ordinary, and how it had felt like being left outside again. The very thing I thought I'd escaped had followed me back in a different form. The next day, I started skipping lunch. Instead, I walked around the back of the field, hearing the faint roar of cars beyond the fence. I watched other groups laughing in clusters, their voices tangled in the air. Every sound that used to amaze me now reminded me that I didn't quite belong anywhere. It wasn't their fault. They were trying. But friendship had always been my translation of safety, and now it was written in a language I couldn't read fluently anymore. Still, Irisa didn't give up. She'd find me behind the gym after school, her hair pulled back, her hands steady. She didn't talk much. She didn't have to. We communicated in fragments, signs, glances, small half-smiles that said enough. For a while, that was enough to keep me afloat. But the world doesn't pause for anyone. As my hearing sharpened, I started catching pieces of conversations I was never meant to hear. Voices behind closed doors. Teachers talking about me like I was a project. Students mocking the way I spoke when I tried to use my voice aloud. The worst was overhearing Cade one afternoon. He wasn't being cruel. He was frustrated. He told Lake he didn't know how to help me anymore. That he missed when things were easier, when communication felt simple. It wasn't betrayal, but it hurt anyway. That night, I went home and turned off my hearing aids again. The silence wrapped around me like a blanket I'd forgotten how to love. My mother found me sitting in the dark, staring at the small device on the table. She didn't say anything. She just sat next to me and placed her hand over mine. For a long time, we didn't move. Eventually, she turned to me and said something softly. I could read her lips, even in the low light. She told me the world would never be quiet again. But that didn't mean I had to drown in it. I didn't answer, but I heard every word. The next morning, I went to school, determined to fix what was left of me. I started talking more, not with words, but with action. I rejoined the group at lunch, laughed when I didn't understand jokes, nodded when people talked too fast. I thought if I acted normal long enough, maybe I'd feel it again. For a few weeks, it worked. Things went back to something like before. Cade apologized for being distant. Lake started signing more often again. Wayne told me about his family's camping trip and insisted I come next time. But something had shifted that none of us could fix. The simplicity was gone. Every sound carried weight now. Every silence carried meaning. I realized that hearing the world didn't make it easier. It made it louder. And when everything is loud, the quiet things that matter most are easy to miss. I didn't want to lose them, but I could feel it happening. Small distances growing between us like cracks in glass. Irisa was the only one who seemed steady. She kept showing up, kept signing even when everyone else was talking over her, kept reminding me in her quiet way that I was still me, not broken, not different, just evolving. It was her idea to bring everyone together again. A weekend by the lake near her cousin's cabin. A reset. I agreed. Maybe I hoped that if I went back to where it all began, to the place where laughter and silence once coexisted easily, I could find the version of us that still felt whole. The weekend came wrapped in sunlight and wind. We met early, backpacks heavy with snacks and promises to forget everything that had gone wrong. Cade drove, blasting music loud enough to shake the old truck, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't flinch at the sound. I sat in the back seat watching trees rush by. The world outside looked endless. Every mile seemed to peel away a layer of noise from my mind. When we arrived, the lake looked like glass, calm, wide, reflecting a sky so blue it hurt to look at. We unpacked in silence, the kind that wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind that meant we were all a little nervous about what this weekend was supposed to fix. Wayne started a fire. Lake set up the tents. Cade kept joking that we'd freeze to death without him, and Irisa sat by the water, her hands moving idly, tracing patterns in the air. I watched them all, realizing how fragile our togetherness really was. A group of people bound by years of friendship and by the quiet hope that none of it had changed too much. That night, the firelight turned everything gold. I could hear the crackle of wood, the low rhythm of crickets, the distant ripple of water against the shore. It was overwhelming and peaceful at the same time. For a long while, no one said anything. The silence wasn't empty. It was full of memories, the kind we didn't need to speak out loud. Then Cade threw a twig into the flames and said something that carried through the night like a soft confession. He said he missed how easy everything used to be, how we never had to think about what we said, how simple it felt to just exist in the same space. He said he didn't realize how much I had to adjust and how he had no idea how to help. The firelight flickered across his face. He looked smaller somehow, honest in a way I hadn't seen since before everything changed. I told him, not with words but with signs, that I didn't blame him, that I missed the simplicity too, that sometimes growing up just meant learning new ways to hold on to the same people. Irisa's eyes shimmered as she watched. Lake smiled quietly. Wayne wiped his face with his sleeve like smoke had gotten in his eyes, even though we all knew it hadn't. Something shifted between us then, a fragile understanding, but real. We stayed by the fire until it burned low. The stars above the lake looked impossibly bright, as if they were listening. I turned off my hearing aids for the first time that night. The silence that followed wasn't cold or lonely. It was gentle. I could still see my friends laughing, the glow of the fire warming their faces. The world moved in perfect rhythm, even without sound. I realized then that I didn't need to choose between silence and noise. Both were parts of me. Both had shaped who I was. The next morning, I woke early. Mist hung low over the water. Irisa was already there, sitting on the dock with her knees pulled to her chest. She turned when she saw me, smiling without a word. I joined her. For a while, we just watched the sun break across the lake. When I finally turned my hearing aids back on, the world returned in a soft rush, waves whispering, birds calling, footsteps behind us. Cade's voice carried faintly through the mist, joking about breakfast and burnt marshmallows. It didn't hurt anymore. The noise didn't drown me now. It carried me. As the day stretched on, laughter came easier. We went swimming, we ate too much, we pretended we were still those carefree kids from before everything got complicated. But I knew something had changed, and that it was okay. We were growing. We were learning. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was behind anyone. I wasn't the silent one anymore. I wasn't the miracle story or the project or the symbol. I was just me, a boy who could finally hear, not just with his ears, but with everything inside him. That night, as we packed to leave, I stood by the water, one last time. I took off the hearing aids and held them in my hands, feeling their weight. They were small things, 2 pieces of plastic and metal, but they carried the sound of my entire life. I didn't need them to feel complete, but I needed to remember what they gave me. When I put them back on, the sound of my friends calling my name felt like music. As we drove home, the sun dipped low, painting the road in orange and gold. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and smiled. I had spent years wishing for silence, then years fighting it. But somewhere between the noise and the quiet, I had found something better. Understanding. Understanding that people don't have to be perfect to love you. That friendship doesn't disappear just because it changes shape. That hearing the truth, no matter how hard, is always better than living in the dark. The road hummed beneath us. The air was full of laughter. The world was loud again, beautifully, imperfectly loud, and for once, I didn't want it any other way. If this story touched you, don't forget to subscribe to Tale Hub for more stories that stay with you long after the screen goes dark. Thank you for listening, and for feeling this one with us.